As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Happy Monday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and last weekend, Silicon Valley Bank, a lender to some of the biggest names in the technology world, became the largest bank to fail since the 2008 financial crisis, according to the media. So this move put nearly $175 billion in customer deposits, according to the New York Times, under control of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC. So what does this mean for us, for the future of America's economy? Does this play right into the hands of Joe Biden's inflation plan? I think it's a plan for America and to continue to stifle our economy. Well, my good friend Vivek Ramaswamy joined me this morning on my radio program, Jenna Ellis in the Morning. You can always listen to that from 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern on afr.net. You can go and find your local station, download the free app, or listen right on the website, wherever you stream. It's AFR for American Family Radio, afr.net. And Vivek joined me this morning to give me his thoughts on the SVB, or the Silicon Valley Bank, financial crisis. And so he's going to join me for that interview right after the break. You are not going to want to miss it. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and I hope you're having a wonderful Monday morning, as I am. I have my coffee right here, and you always got to have coffee in the morning, and always talking to Adam and Devin about that, the great team here at American Family Radio Network. So we will be getting to our next guest in just a few moments, Vivek Ramaswamy, who, of course, is running for President of the United States, and I think it's such a great opportunity here in the Republican primary to have a really wide bench and actually look at what are the policies that we want to support moving forward. I feel like as conservatives, we have really been on the defensive so much over the last, especially 2 years, to say we just have to roll back and change everything that the Biden administration has thoroughly corrupted in so many different areas of policy and of executive orders. Thankfully, the Supreme Court has rolled back some of that with the composition on the bench, of course, attributable to President Trump. But really, I think this is an opportunity that we can, as a conservative party, and of course, that would include all of us that genuinely care about biblical principles in this country, move forward with saying, okay, what should America look like, and how can we best preserve and protect our God-given rights moving forward? And I think that's always a conversation that we need to have, not just the day-to-day really struggles, frankly, that we all see and we all experience in daily society. I mean, just like what's going on right now with the Silicon Valley Bank. This is the largest bank to go under since 2008. And the New York Times reported on Friday, Silicon Valley Bank, a lender to some of the biggest names in the technology world, became the largest bank to fail since the 2008 financial crisis. And so this move put nearly 175 billion in customer deposits under control of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FDIC. And so they created a new bank, the National Bank of Santa Clara, to hold the deposits and other assets of the failed bank. So the agency said in a news release that the new entity would be operating by Monday morning. We're still waiting on some of those announcements, and the checks issued by the old bank would continue to clear. And so, according as well to the Wall Street Journal, Silicon Valley Bank's failure boils down, they say, to one simple misstep. It grew too fast by using borrowed short-term money from depositors who could ask to be repaid at any time, and invested in long-term assets that it was unable or unwilling to sell. So when those interest rates rose quickly, it was saddled with losses that ultimately forced it to try to raise fresh capital, spooking depositors who yanked their funds in 2 days. Well, Governor Ron DeSantis said yesterday on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo that he, at least in part, attributed some of the bank's failure to the DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion issues of the bank. And it's been very interesting to see how that may have played a factor into the Silicon Valley Bank. And so as soon as Vivek is on the line, we're going to get his commentary on that. And of course, he wrote the book Woke Inc. That is talking about the long-term future of corporations when they're going woke, and having this view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the ESG standard as well, that really focuses just on the identity politics of not only the corporation, but also the composition of the board, and how they manipulate their hiring practices, really do have practical, real-world effects. And our good friend James Lindsay, who's a friend of this program, and we'll definitely have him on if he's available this week to talk more about this. But he tells me all the time about how this whole DEI wokeness is going to end up harming and have real world practical harm on the ultimate consumer product. And if you think about that in the context of something like, for example, an airline, if you look at what DEI would do for the composition of how we hire pilots, flight attendants, safety protocols, engineers. I mean, even just in the context of airline travel, not even talking about any other sort of transportation that, of course, Secretary Pete is not doing a good job on. But if you look at it just in that view, I care, and I think everyone listening, even the haters from the left, and welcome to the show as well. I think that everyone would agree that the one fundamental characteristic and attribute that we all care about in a pilot and an airline safety team is the ability to have the plane take off safely, fly safely, and land the plane. That's literally it. Those are the qualifications. And so if the airlines start hiring based on DEI standards, then is that ultimately going to impact their consumer product? Should we be concerned about that? Well, James Lindsay thinks so. And I think a lot of us can and should be very concerned about potential hiring practices and whether or not diversity and identity ultimately is far more important to some of these corporations that are going woke, instead of or at the expense of some safety standards and practices. So those are the things that we really do need to keep an eye on. And of course, we don't want to just say, well, any diversity hiring practices are obviously nonsense. We can always look at what is the practice ultimately of the company. How does that impact safety standards? And in this context, how may this have impacted the Silicon Valley Bank? So Vivek Ramaswamy is ready. And so welcoming him into the program. And good morning, Vivek. And, this Silicon Valley bank issue, how much do you think DEI plays into this, or has that just kind of been a narrative from conservatives to not focus on maybe some of the other larger issues?
Well, look, I mean, there's been no greater opponent of the woke agenda and woke capitalism in America than I am. And so I'm happy to talk about that dimension of this. But I do think it's important to understand the essence of what actually happened, just so we can see the bigger picture here, because there's even something deeper here that isn't directly related to woke capitalism, but is related to corruption in this country. And then woke capitalism and ESG becomes a part of the picture, Jenna. So what basically happened here, I think it's just important to see the basic facts before we look at it through the woke picture. The basic facts are that Silicon Valley Bank took risks with depositor money that were not great risks, and the bank failed. And you know what? A lot of the depositors are tech companies, including big tech companies in Silicon Valley, that should not have put that much money in Silicon Valley Bank. Now, some of them did because they got special favors in return. But how capitalism works is if you make those bad decisions, then you're held accountable. Well, the way crony capitalism works in America today is different. When you make those bad decisions, if you're part of a favored class, then you get a bailout. And that's what happened to those tech companies in Silicon Valley last night. I just wrote about this in my op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which is running in print today, which lays out exactly what happened. But that's the moral of the story. For years, Silicon Valley Bank and its cronies lobbied for special rules in Washington that allowed them to take these risks because they said we're a smaller bank and we're not systemically important. Well, guess what? Over the weekend, all the way up to last night, they made the exact opposite argument, saying that no, this was systemically important. That's why they needed a taxpayer bailout. That's exactly what happened yesterday when the U.S. government, they said it's not a bailout. They said it's not taxpayer money. Don't believe it. There's no free lunch. They broke the rules retroactively to bail out those that are depositors in Silicon Valley. Now the woke picture comes in, where this is a company that has actually been virtue signaling for a very long time about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Notably, just a year ago, they made a $5 billion commitment to sustainable finance and green operations for the purpose of a healthier planet. Well, you would think they should be focusing on a healthier balance sheet instead, but there's a cynical dimension to this. This is what conservatives miss. They just point it out as hypocrisy and laugh at it. No. This is an essential part of the game, because what they were really doing is they're buying an insurance policy. They're virtue signaling to the current administration with the expectation that the government would come through in their hour of need. And guess what, Jen? I'm sorry to say it. They were actually right. That's how this dirty game is played. And that's why I'm on a mission to expose corruption wherever I see it. You and I've talked about this in the RNC, in the Republican National Committee, in the federal government. But here it's the corruption of crony capitalism. And it's kind of sad to see that even other Republicans are really shy about calling this out. And I saw why. I had multiple billionaires call me over the weekend from Silicon Valley, throwing arguments against the wall, like spaghetti against a wall, trying to persuade me to take a different stance. I lost a lot of big donors over the weekend over this. But I don't care. We have to call out corruption for what it is. And what you see is in both parties, but the Republican Party included, you have this sort of captured class because these are the people who actually bankroll them. So that's what's going on.
Wow. And that makes so much sense. Vivek Ramaswamy, and I just want to be the first to tell you that I'm very proud of you for standing firm and being principled and saying that calling out corruption wherever it is, whether it's in our party or it's somewhere else or it's in these banks or wherever it is, we need to call that out and do so in a way that, of course, is principled and without personal interest. And I have also been very surprised at some people who over the weekend in some of their commentary really seem to not understand how capitalism works in America. One of them is actually a good friend of mine, Joel Pollack, who writes for Breitbart. He's been on my podcast a number of times. I've been on his show on SiriusXM, and he tweeted this, and I want to get your reaction to it. He said, quote, "I'm floored by how little sympathy conservatives generally have for employees in Silicon Valley, most of whom have nothing to do with SVB and some of whom are not woke. This is a soft form of civil war, or maybe a prelude to it. We no longer care about each other's suffering. End of quote. And I'm just sitting here thinking, well, okay, capitalism is all about the entrepreneurial mindset that you understand it's up to you. And as an employee, if my company goes under, then I go and get a new job, or I go and enterprise my own work. I mean, at what point did we ever say that it's not caring about human suffering if we allow capitalism to work, and banks that, didn't have a good structure, if they ultimately fail, why is it our responsibility as the taxpayer to go and bail out these banks just because we're concerned about so-called human suffering? That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's even one step worse than that, though. It's one step worse because it's not even about the workers. It's about actually the fact that they're protecting the venture capitalists and the founder class, who are actually on track to be the multi-billionaires. I'll tell you why, right? What happened is, let's say you're one of those startups and you lost some money. They're claiming, oh, well, then I can't make payroll next week if my money is trapped in that bank account. No, actually, that's not true, because you want to know why? Your business model today is the same as it was 3 weeks ago. That means that's an opportunity for investors, your venture capital investors and otherwise, to put in more money by buying equity in the company. Now, that's painful if you're a founder or an existing VC, because that means it's dilution to your ownership in the company. So when the company succeeds, you won't make as much money. That's true. But that's really what's at issue here. So again, they're using the workers as a pawn to make an argument really just against equity dilution for themselves in their own company. So the way capitalism is supposed to work is when you make a mistake, well, you know what? Even if you have to claw your way out of it, you don't quite make as much money in the end. Tough luck. That's the way it's played. It's not even tough luck. It's actually even the tough consequence of your own bad decisions. If you're a publicly traded company like Roku, which bewilderingly put over $400 million with Silicon Valley Bank when the deposit insurance threshold is $250,000, that is senseless risk-taking. But what we now tell them is, hey, that's okay. You can take those kinds of crazy risks without diversifying, without doing your due diligence, because the government's going to be there to backstop you anyway. Well, actually, they're using workers as a pawn to make the argument to say, well, then, companies like other tech startups can't make payroll. No, you can. You just have to raise the money, which means your founder and your CEO and your Series A investors in Silicon Valley would own less of the company because you got diluted. Such is the price of making poor decisions. And yet that's exactly the class who we saved. And so what happened in Silicon Valley over the weekend was even dirtier than that, really, is you had a bunch of people that were rooting for the likelihood of a bank run in America across other banks this week. And they were fear-mongering, and they were stoking those fears, and they were instigating those fears precisely to justify a weekend jam job bailout, which they got, of Silicon Valley Bank. This is crony capitalism, and many of them are Republican donors. It is shameful. Many of them were prospective donors to me. And you know what? It would be convenient. I can understand. I am seeing firsthand, Jenna. I understand why politicians would bend the knee, because it's a painful thing to watch. You're in a competitive race. Raising money is a big part of this. And you see firsthand what those pressures are that cause candidates, including in our party, to cut corners and just say, well, it's really just about the broader systemic risk. BS. That is bogus. It is fear-mongering. But they use it to they don't care about the workers. They don't care about American competitiveness. These are all the arguments they used on me. They just cared about making sure their startup companies and their portfolios got bailed out. And the sad part is they won. It exactly happened. And I think, we can have an Occupy Silicon Valley of historic proportions, because it's effectively the same thing that played out in 2008. But we need fighters who are actually willing to expose that corruption. So if I'm losing billionaire donors, fine, let me at least pick up $1 ones instead. I mean, that's going to have to be a grassroots uprising that actually makes this work. If people want to learn more about this, or even just hear about the details of my policy perspectives on fighting corruption, Vivek2024.com. That's great, because it's going to take that bottom-up uprising, because I think I certainly alienated a lot of the Silicon Valley donor class over this.
And I have so many more questions, so we're going to hold you over through the break, Vivek Ramaswamy, and we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning, talking about the SVB Bank. We'll be right back. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook. You need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. Welcome back. And before the break, we were talking about the Silicon Valley Bank and what's going on and what happened over the weekend with my good friend Vivek Ramaswamy, who, of course, is running for president and has just a really excellent perspective on this. So if you're just tuning in now, definitely go back and listen to his commentary. And we'll continue this, Vivek, because you mentioned that this is an aspect of how conservatives even are they're either genuinely not understanding what's going on here in terms of not really promoting genuine entrepreneurship and principles of capitalism, which then go back to the principles of our founding and ultimately the principles of being genuine conservatives. And yet then others are perfectly okay. They know what's going on. It's corruption, and they are willing in their own self-interest to promote some of these really bad ideas for how to solve some of these problems. So where on the grand spectrum of all of this would you say that most, I guess, billionaires and some of these people who are, part of the federal government as well, whether they're donors or they're actually in the federal government, like Janet Yellen and some of these, who of course isn't a conservative, but where would you say that the perspective is for the federal government right now in terms of Republicans versus Democrats? Are Republicans even doing a good job on this?
This is not a Republican versus Democrat issue. This is a uniparty issue. Okay, so many Republicans are captured by the same donor class. And I understand how this game works, Jenna. I'm not just railing at this from the outside. I mean, my former peers from Harvard and Yale Law School, and, I've made $500 million plus myself and bottom up, not with anybody else's help, but by starting businesses in the system of free market capitalism, been in the hedge fund world. I understand this world. Many of these folks are my peers, and as of this weekend, some of them friends or former friends, not from my standpoint, but from theirs, because they're so, I would say, alienated by my comments. But the reality is they're blinded by self-interest. Many of them are even thinking and even good people, but who would be saying exactly what I'm saying if it wasn't their own self-interest at stake. And then they convince themselves of these new principles that somehow, under this circumstance, a bailout is justified. Not in East Palestine, Ohio, not if it was somebody else's bank, but Silicon Valley Bank. And the arguments I heard, were staggering. I'll see if I can, in the next minute or so, pull up one of the text messages I got over the weekend. I can even read it to you, but it said something like, these are the future, this is the future of America. These are the excellence economy members driving the revival of the American economy. Why would you oppose them? And it actually shows the hubris of saying that, if you're sitting in Silicon Valley, it actually reveals the entitlement culture a little bit, saying that, no, we are the special ones. We are the chosen ones. That's why you can't let those businesses fail with the bailout, even though normally, if you're a hardworking American starting a small business in most parts of the country, if you take a risk, great, you might get the upside of taking that risk, but when you fail, you fail. And I think it's that system of two sets of rules, right? One set of rules for everyone, which is that there's a $250,000 maximum, FDIC insured maximum for your bank account. That is the rule. Supposedly that was the rule for Silicon Valley Bank too. But when they fail, no, actually, we're going to rewrite the rule in retrospect. And even though we said it was a $250,000 maximum, even if you had $400 million in there, you still get backstopped. And it's that two-tiered system of rules that most people in the abstract, even some of these folks in Silicon Valley and in government, would say, no, we don't like that. But when it comes to their own self-interest, those principles go out the window. And, it's one of the reasons I am running for president, because I have seen the other side of that. And somebody needs to be thinking about the nation, but also someone who understands how that dirty game is played. And I just think that this anti-corruption agenda, and I think that's a big part of my whole candidacy, is fighting corruption, fighting the managerial class, whether it's the administrative bureaucracy in the federal government or this merger, this uniparty of not only Republicans and Democrats, but even the uniparty's merger with the private sector, that somebody who understands it really needs to take it on without fear and without their own self-interest intermingled with it. And so, I think this is going to have to be bottom-up, grassroots driven, but I hope that's what we deliver, Jenna.
And that also makes so much sense, that it is more of the uniparty. And that's what genuine grassroots conservatives have been so frustrated with the establishment Republicans, or people who are in the federal government, and they're picking winners and losers based on their own self-interest. And that isn't just a Republican versus Democrat issue. That is a corruption issue. And so it does seem like then if this bank is just preferred based on the status, or based on what good it will do for the uniparty, and some of these partnerships that aren't fair to someone who isn't playing that game, then we shouldn't have that type of system. And so in just the last 2 or 3 minutes that I have with you, Vivek Ramaswamy, I think the outrage from people saying, this is so frustrating, and this is yet another thing of the swamp that we're seeing, and people are frustrated and feel like they can't do anything to change it. It's almost like we're just sitting back watching this happen, and we're commenting on it, and we can be frustrated. But what are you planning on doing if you are elected president to genuinely actually change this, and how can people help you get there?
So we need to reform the Federal Reserve. That's a big untold part of the story. And I think that the U.S. president can do that by narrowing its scope to restoring the dollar as a unit of measurement rather than playing God. They haven't been very good at playing God. They've been playing God with a fat finger. And I think that the Federal Reserve is not God. But that's one example of reforming the administrative state, the three-letter bureaucracies in general. I've stated my plan to gut that federal bureaucracy. And you know what? I think you should get other Republicans, get Nikki Haley, get Ron DeSantis. I think other people need to be talking about this rather than hiding from these kinds of issues because they may be captured by donors. But the good news is my first step is reforming this process itself, even in the Republican primary. My best place to do that, the next stop, is on the debate stage. And I want to get a prominent spot on that debate stage to make sure that no one's going to escape these issues. So whether or not anyone is going to support me next year, that's a question for next year. But literally the best way, if you want to channel that, I will be your messenger to make sure even the Republican Party can't escape from these issues. Elevate that on the debate stage. I think number one, literally this morning, right now, if you wanted to contribute to that, $1, forget the money, $5, $1, it doesn't matter. What actually matters is making sure these issues are elevated. That's what gets me a prime spot on the debate stage. It's Vivek, Vivek, 2024.com. And I promise you this, is you get me a good spot, prime spot on that debate stage, even if the RNC plays games. Let's make sure they don't play those games. We will elevate these issues, and nobody's going to be able to hide from them. And we actually have a Republican Party that stands for the everyday citizen rather than for the cronyism that represents the Democratic Party today.
Well, thanks so much, Vivek. I can really appreciate your commentary weekly. And I know that you need to run to something else, and really appreciate your time today. So thank you so much. And, for everyone who's listening to this program, I mean, this is why I love having Vivek on weekly. Not only, has he been a friend of mine for the last few years, and, obviously he has been very much engaged in a lot of these issues with Woke Inc. and some of the other ways that he has called attention to these issues. But I'm of the opinion, as a constitutional conservative, that we need to elevate voices like his, and we need to elevate more voices of the wider swath of conservatives that understand how to return us to being principled. And with, and there's so much debate, and you all have heard me talk about this a lot, that we really, really do need to focus on the issues as a party moving ahead to 2024, and not just be tribalistic into the who. I love so much of what President Trump stands for, what he did in his first term, Of course, I got to be a part of all of that. I've told him personally many times how much the federal judiciary is, I think, going to be the greatest legacy of his first term, because we have a conservative majority on the court. And so issues like what West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey said this morning about the filing for the women's sports issue and protecting women in sports. These are issues that we can have confidence in because of what President Trump did for the composition of the court, along with so many other great policy issues. I love what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. Have there been some disagreements with President Trump, some disagreements with Ron DeSantis, some disagreements with, Vivek? Of course. And that's the nature of policy. That's the nature of why we debate things. That's even what our founders did at the very the very first arguments in the founding of our country. They all got together and debated what is the best way that we can preserve and protect our God-given rights moving forward as a nation. And I think that we need to have those debates, genuinely have them on the merits, not just saying and, calling people names. And, I see on Twitter all the time, and it's sad to me that when I elevate something, great that Governor DeSantis is doing, then, the really diehard loyalist, Trump supporters will call that out and say, well, you're a traitor, and and say, you're not supporting President Trump. I'm thinking, I support America, so of course I'm going to highlight something that Governor DeSantis is doing in the great state of Florida. That's excellent, and we should all be doing that, because we have to remember who the genuine opposition is. It's not the members of our own party. It's not the members of our own conservative group. The opposition are the uniparty and the Democrats and the progressive, insane leftists that want to tear down and destroy this country, starting fundamentally and first off with destroying life in the womb. That's why the abortion issue and the issue of making sure that we protect and preserve life at all stages is fundamental, and it's paramount. And then we move up from there. How do we protect and preserve the rights that God gives us as parents, as individuals, as entrepreneurs, as professionals, as ministers of the gospel of Christ, with protecting our right to freely exercise religion and our faith? I mean, all of these things are common to the American experience. And we have to remember that it matters so much more, the principles and the philosophy of how we understand our system of government to work, than the siloed tribalism of who we support. And so on this show, as much as we can debate policy, and we do, I don't want to debate, at least yet, who. And I have not endorsed anyone for the Republican primary in 2024, and I don't plan to, at least at this stage, because I think it's so important, without signaling who I might support, to talk about the issues and to talk about them in a very open and transparent way, without personal loyalties one over the other. And, obviously I did work for President Trump. I have a great friendship with him. And, I love, again, what Ron DeSantis is doing. I even really like a lot of what other candidates are saying, like Nikki Haley. If Mike Pompeo jumps in, he was a really great Secretary of State. I have a lot of respect for his policy positions. And I think that that's actually from a very encouraging point of view, that we have all of these candidates that have so much in common to preserve and protect our system of government that's premised and founded in the understanding that our rights come from God, our creator, not our government. And so as we move forward into what is already a very, very, very contentious Republican primary, I would love for all of us, and I would encourage you who are listening this morning, take a step back and say, what are the principles here? And I like the way that Vivek frames this when he says, let's talk about the what and the why, and not yet the who. Because I think whether we get a Donald Trump, a Ron DeSantis, a Vivek Ramaswamy, even a Nikki Haley, right? And I don't have any thought that she's actually going to win the primary, but moving forward, regardless of who on the Republican ticket moves forward, that person is going to be so much better in terms of implementing a genuinely conservative agenda than anyone on the Democrat side. And obviously not everyone who may jump into the Republican primary would be someone who would advance all of those values and principles. Obviously, we do need to be on the lookout for more of the globalist establishment, Republican in name only, and the people that would be part of that uniparty. Of course, we would call out and say, okay, maybe they might be better in some ways than Democrats, but definitely in the full composition of the people who are going for the nomination, some people would not be better than others. But right now, these kind of top three of President Trump, Ron DeSantis, even though I know he hasn't declared yet, but we're all anticipating that he will, and Vivek, I'm really excited to hear all of them talk about the policy positions and what they want to see from America and from the presidency and the federal office that they would hold moving forward. And I think there's a lot of room here to debate and discuss, and we need to engage on the merits, unlike the Democrats, who will always say, well, let's just call each other names and, say, well, this is a settled issue because, it's Trump's nomination and that's it. And so they would foreclose us talking on the merits as much as the Democrats have done on other issues. We shouldn't be like that. We should always debate and discuss on the merits. And that's what we'll keep doing each and every morning on Jenna Ellis in the Morning. And I'm so grateful that all of you join me in the morning because I love having these conversations with you. So you can reach us at Jenna Ellis AM on Twitter, or also email us, jenna@afr.net. Make it a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt so soft in the store, but then when you leave and you go to use it, it's not really that absorbent? It's basically a towel that is leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels that actually work. I know, it's totally mind-blowing. Towels that actually dry you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors. I have the sage green and the white. I love them. And right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 with promo code Jenna. That's JENNA. So go to mypillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty and have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So to receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece towel set of MyPillow towels, just go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's mypillow.com, promo code Jenna.